Platform from Twitch and YouTube through network television, through cable TV, through like Netflix and these subscription things, there's just so much out there that's amazing. And with that, welcome to the Down in Front podcast.
What's up?
That was like the nicest intro.
Walla walla hey.
Walla hey. So, thanks for joining us. I'm going to be your host, Mike, today, filling in for Warren, even though Warren's sitting in a chair right next to me. You know how that is. Thanks for joining us for the Down in Front podcast. Tonight, we're going to be reviewing Wet Hot American Summer, 10 years later. First of all, I'd like to go around the horn and introduce everyone, these fine folks, starting with my right-hand man, Warren. How are you doing?
I am doing very well, my friend.
Ooh.
So, as a tradition, I guess I get to go first, and I really have not had a chance to been watching. This has been moving week, so this has been a pretty crazy week for me, but I have been keeping up with Season 3 of Rick and Morty, and guys, this season is absolutely hilarious. I love this show, and I just love the fact that they are actually like kind of stepping up their game, and it's very smart, it's very fun, it's very like crazy. It's just awesome. So I'm super pumped about necessarily watching that. So Rick and Morty Season 3, definitely out there. It's on Adult Swim. Currently, I am sipping on a very, very nice red wine blend. It's called Chime. I'll see if I can necessarily put this photo in the show notes when we post it up, but it's very smooth. They even says, hints of cherry, plum, oak, vanilla. But it's a very, very nice, very like easy, medium-bodied sort of red wine to necessarily try. So this is called Chime, and it's very good. So hashtag sip to that. And thanks, Mike, for hosting.
Oh, thank you. Moving on to Warren's right-hand man, we have Bryland. How you doing, buddy?
Hello, Mr. Blewett. Good evening.
Bonsoir, monsieur.
Cool. So what I've been watching is, we're all sports guys here. We all have our favorite sports teams and everything, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, football. The American kind. No, nothing else is worth it.
Soccer.
I mean, football and soccer, both my two favorite entertaining sports out there. They're the ones I want to watch. Everything else to me is kind of boring. So I took a dive into esports this past week and watched the Dota 2 International Invitational Championships, also known as the International, or TI7. So their 7th year doing this. It is a very unique and also entertaining event, I would say. I had a lot of fun watching it. And I don't even play Dota 2. And just to let everybody know, Dota 2 is what they call a MOBA, which means a group of 5 or 6 dudes battle another group of 5 or 6 dudes across the map. And the goal is to destroy each other's base or kill each other's characters. And not knowing much about this game, I found it to be also really entertaining. I mean, I had to chalk it up to the commentators they had. When there was something important happening on screen, the commentators were really well to actually educate the audience on what's going on, but also they brought a lot of fun and excitement. If you ever watched like EVO Tournament Championships, which is the fighting game championships, then it was just as intense and exciting as those can be as well. And it's also, I mean, it's created, it's almost there to being like a legitimate sports entertainment package. I mean, this year, their prize pool was up to $24 million. The winning team, they took home $10 million of that. And they even had fantasy leagues that fans could actually build out their favorite, they'd take their favorite players and build out their own Dota teams and compete with their friends. And whoever wins the most points at the end of the season is, the fantasy league champion. So it's really neat to see how all these traditional sports elements intertwine into this more digital realm.
Yeah, and speaking of that, I definitely encourage people who aren't typically into e-games to check out some of these larger scale e-sport events. It may sound like something that's fringe to you, especially if you're someone who doesn't participate in gaming lately. But as Brian was saying, e-gaming is really gaining some momentum throughout the world. You get these tournaments with massive payouts, with like actual teams that are starting to be bought out by sports teams owners, even here in the U.S. And France, who will be hosting the 2024 Olympics, their Olympic committee has already announced, or recently announced, that they're considering making certain esports an actual Olympic event during their Olympics. So it's definitely worth taking a look at, even if you're not a gamer yourself. Who knows, you might be surprised.
Yeah, what's interesting about that is I like that they look for nationalities in these esport teams, but a lot of these teams are actually very multinational. Even like the quote-unquote U.S. team, Evil Genius, like one person's from Pakistan, another person's from Canada, another person's from Finland, and then you have 2 U.S. players on it. So could you really call it a U.S.-based team? Not really. But that's the cool thing about all those teams. It's the best of the best coming from all over the world to compete with one another, and it's always good sportsmanship as well.
Interesting. And sorry. Go ahead. I was just going to say I've really gotten big into competitive goat simulator. It's invigorating to watch.
Goat simulator is amazing. I am sticking with the gentleman. So, Gentleman Jack on the rocks in a nice cool glass. Nothing better for a nice warm summer day or evening.
Can't get any classier than that. So if you did, you might have to go to detention. Speaking of detention, let's talk to Bryland's left-hand boy. Give it to me.
Hey, everybody. Yeah. Mocha Mike here. Happy to be with you all again today. As far as... I am not left-handed. I'm simply Bryland's left-hand boy. But yeah, so in terms of what I've been watching lately, I've actually been watching a lot of Voltron, a Legendary Defender. It's an anime and actually an original production of Netflix that is now on its 3rd season. A friend recommended it to me. I used to watch Voltron when I was a little kid, the original series, and I checked out this Netflix version, and it's actually really impressed me. It's a pretty solid update in terms of, speaking to younger generations and what they like in their animation. And it's got some great action in it as well. The animation in it is really fluid and surprisingly well executed, at least more so than I would have expected. So shout out to Netflix for, putting the effort into this production, as well as updating the sense of humor and the character dialogue and their personalities to sort of suit a modern younger audience. They did a really good job, and it's taken me by surprise so far. As for what
I've only watched season 1 of that, but one of my favorite jokes in there was when they try to form Voltron for the first time, and they just make like a cheerleader pyramid of the lions.
Yeah, it's surprised me. There are actual moments where I've begrudgingly chuckled, which is a weird sentence in and of itself. But yeah, it's worth a check out. I've been playing it in the background when I'm doing other things, quote unquote adult things like sweeping the floor. So it's been good so far though.
Full strokes on the broom, or is it like?
Oh, I got a good long stroke.
Yeah, you do.
When I'm sweeping the floor. As for what I'm drinking, I don't have any like wine or beer to share with you guys today. So instead, I poured myself a miserable-looking shot of tequila. This is by a company called Altos. It is 100% agave tequila, hecho en Mexico. And I'm going to hate it, but this goes out to everyone listening and to all of my fellow podcasters, shirtless or shirted. Cheers.
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 All right, that wasn't that bad. It's pretty good. Actually, really smooth.
That was the tequila face right there. Oh, I'm going to regret this later.
Discernible from my O face.
And speaking of regretting later, I'm your host, Mike. So I have been watching nothing, absolutely nothing. I was in a wedding over the weekend. If you check out our teaser, you can see my likeness in bobblehead form. And I've just basically been sitting looking at that for the entirety of the rest of the week. What I'm drinking is apparently a rare beer. It's a Magic Hat number 9, who the liquor store clerk had absolutely no idea what it was, even though you could find it pretty much everywhere. It blew my mind. I don't know. I would say I really had no time. The only thing I could do was just marathon our feature presentation. So before we get into spoilers, I just want to kind of get a quick judge of the room. Digitally speaking, of course, because we are not in the same room together. I want to see where we are with our wet hot knowledge. Like, when did you get into it? What else you've listened to or watched from these guys? Kind of on that. I guess let's go reverse order. Mike, where'd you start with these guys?
Yeah, so I actually had the good fortune of seeing this film shortly after it came out in 2001. This film I saw when they would air it on Comedy Central after it left theaters. So it's very possible that it might have been early 2002. But it was definitely when I was in high school, and it was delightful. I always had a really weird sense of humor. And this David Wain and Michael Ian Black, that whole Michael Showalter, the three of them, their ideas on comedy speaks directly to my soul in terms of what I find funny. So yeah, I absolutely love the show, dating back to when it first dropped.
That's awesome, Brian.
I kind of found this later after it came out. Like, I had heard its name passed around all the time. Like, when I was a senior in college, I think it came out in theaters, but a lot of the freshmen saw it. I was like, I wonder what that is. I guess I'll watch it on VHS or DVD or something. And I never got around to it. And it wasn't until like probably about 5 or 6 years after that, it popped up on Netflix. I wasn't doing anything one day, and I was like, let's watch this. And it was actually a movie at first that intrigued me, and I was kind of like, what did I just watch? And so I had to watch it again to actually enjoy it. That kind of opened me up to go back to watch things like The State and Stella and other David Wain comedies like that.
Brian, did you watch the alternative cut that they did? Is that what you mean by watch it a second time?
No, I watched it twice in a row, and the first time I didn't realize, my brain couldn't process what was on screen. But it was after I watched it again, I was like, I really like these characters and what they're doing here, and the odd sense of humor that came about it. And one thing to note about the movie is, like, one thing Warren mentioned during Atomic Blonde was having same-sex scenes in movies and stuff. And the original movie actually had a same-sex scene with two guys that wasn't played for laughs or anything. It was actually, let's show these two guys.
Well, no, it was definitely a shock factor. It also
made for a shock factor, but the way they played it was like, hey, watch these two guys fall in love type of thing.
Right. Well, through just invigorating anal penetration.
So, by the way, shout out. So everybody out there who's been riding that Bradley Cooper train for the past few years, screw y'all, because I've been on that since 2001.
He was in the Stella. So they lifted that scene. The scene in Wet Hot was lifted from a Stella short. Before, like, when they were doing it as a comedy troupe, they shot these like weird, obscure little videos, and they had one called Yard Work, where it was the guy hired like Michael Ian Black, and then they just end up banging in the shed, and then like Satan's involved, like Satan comes out. It's a really weird thing, but it plays a very, very pre-famous Bradley Cooper. And then it's even before, because didn't Wet Hot come out, and then like 2 years later, The Hangover came out. I think it was very close. But the Stella shorts were even way before that. And then they just lifted it over. The only reason I ask about your second time watching it is because I accidentally let the DVD just autoplay to the next part of it, and it was the alternative cut, which is literally the same exact movie, except they insert farts into it.
Yeah.
So like they just overdub the movie themselves with just fart sounds, and that's it. There's literally no extra scenes. There's nothing else. Just fart sounds, and it's amazing.
Yeah, and I think there's also like a documentary on the making of, but I think it's also that documentary has enough footage to be its own second movie from different perspectives.
Yeah, and I mean we could talk about that later in our wins, but they had that, you know, available to them in this series. Warren, what about you? Any sort of like past history with the state guys?
I mean, kind of barely. Great friend of the show, Dylan Cochran, introduced me, I think, to this. I definitely heard about it kind of loosely, but it was just like one of those things that I think it's like a cult sort of approach to like this particular. It's a certain particular comedy that I sit there and I'm like, you know, I can see how it's funny, but it's kind of like not for me. But all right, like I'll give it a shot. So I think I watched Wet Hot with him like one summer, either last year or the year before, and then they came out with like the first day. I don't even remember all of the regular movie of Wet Summer because I was like, we were probably drinking, and it's like, it's not for me. I didn't watch the first day of camp, so I guess going into this one, I'm like, I really don't get a lot of these references. There's a lot of things that are funny that I thought was pretty cool, and that's like, they're funny for the sake of being funny. I was like, all right, awesome, cool. But the moment they introduced a new character, I was like, well, I know who this person is, but I don't get why this is like a big deal sort of thing. So not too much, but I still had fun with it. I still enjoyed a lot of the moments that they actually had of it. So yeah, that was all pretty cool.
So I'll have to say this. In high school, I think my favorite show was Stella. Like, I absolutely lost it every Thursday night for that very, very short-lived TV show. I think I actually saw Wet Hot somehow because I'm terrible with the internet and like looking things up, looking up related things. I somehow saw Wet Hot, I think like a year or two later when I was in college. Like I just missed it completely out of all of the things. Like I think I watched The State before I watched Stella. It made no sense whatsoever. But yeah, I remember I watched it and then watched First Day of Summer when it came out. The day of, I think I marathoned it, and I actually did not know that it was happening until they released the only trailer they released for it, which is probably a good thing because, as we were talking about a little bit before, like there's so much out there that there's a good chance I would just flat out miss this for like months until someone's like, oh, yo, did you catch that? Because there was no hype whatsoever. Like all these A-listers came out and shot this thing, and there was almost no advertisement. There was no like, hey, we're doing this, go watch it type movement. It just had that one trailer that I absolutely lost it when Amy Poehler told Logan to go fuck himself. Like that was, you know, I was kind of like, you know, that, and then they do that quick cut that's just like, fuck you, Logan. Well, fuck you. And at that point, I was like, they're back. This is going to be awesome. It's so sweet. I'm ready for like 3 weeks from now. But cool. So it sounds like we have a bit of a different background on it. So I'd be really interested about hearing our wins and criticisms. First, I want to pause it. Truthfully, this is probably the easiest binge I've ever gone on Netflix. They're all 20 to 25 minute long episodes, and it's 8 episodes. It took me under 4 hours to do. It was awesome. It was an afternoon, and I was done. So I'd say stop right now because we are definitely going to spoil it. I would say there's nothing to spoil because nothing really matters in the end. But do yourself, like, don't be surprised, or be surprised by all the jokes, because some of the humor is certainly out of left field, and I don't want to ruin it for anyone. So we'll pause, we'll come back in a minute or two, and then we'll talk about some spoilers for Wet Hot American Summer 10 years later. once you start interneting sound, it has some amazing results.
Welcome on Downsen Fonsen podcasten, bitte.
And welcome back to the Down in Front podcast.
Yay!
Yay!
So we're gonna launch into spoilers. Hopefully not in German, because my German is limited to wir trinken Bier and wir haben Bier. That's it. That's all I can do. Don't ask for any more.
It's pretty good.
So let's do this. Let's talk about wins first, and then surprise, we'll talk about some criticisms. Let's go to Bryland. Let's start with you for some wins.
Alrighty. So I'm going to kind of break this down into my favorite characters and what I thought they did well. So I have to say my favorite characters out of the Wet Hot series. Number one with a bullet is Andy, Paul Rudd's character. This guy is my spirit animal. He is what I want to be when I grow up. And it was great to see him be in a situation where he was still he thinks he's cool, but he's actually a total jerk character. But also he's kind of starting to face that somewhat. And what I love about this is like Paul Rudd still brought it. I mean, it's amazing that all of these characters that they started at this movie where there are no names are all kind of in the A-list now. And he is making Marvel superhero films, and he'll still take time to come back and do this small little thing and still bring what needs to be done for this small little thing. So the King of the Camp contest against Deegs was amazing. And also when he actually shows that he grew up and having a kid and being responsible and coming back at the end for the reunion, just showing up and saying, like, this is my girlfriend and my child, and then peaced out. I was like, this is perfect ending to who that character is.
It's sometimes great to have like a character have a non-arc. Like he's exactly the same person as you left off from the beginning, and that's perfectly okay in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, like how he was introduced, they always introduce him as a badass, and like to see him as Andy doing donuts, and that was like a donut game. He's just chomping on donuts and all like super fat now. It was good to see like, hey, he thinks he's still cool, but in like the most schlubby ways possible. But also Gene, Christopher Maloney is amazing as Gene. Ever since I saw him hump a fridge in Wet Hot American Summer, he's been one of my favorite characters. And it was really cool to see him living in a trailer down by the beach with his fridge. And it's and the whole like super spy element that they introduced in First Day of Camp to his character, I think added a lot to this continuation. And partnering him up with Chris Pine, Chris Pine's rocker character, and Jason Schwartzman as the camp counselor you never see again after the first day of camp. I thought it made for a really cool way of having like a good guy element that was behind the scenes trying to make sure the camp didn't get blown up by a nuclear weapon.
Nice.
Yep. One of my favorite scenes in here is when Neil showed Victor how to have sex on an empty mattress. That just laughed my ass off, because I mean the way Ken Marino is a brilliant physical comedy genius, and the way he was doing that was amazing.
You're doing it, Vic. You're doing it.
And just the encouragement from Neil was top notch too. Joe Latrulio, he's amazing as well. I love the inside joke about Bradley Cooper not coming back. And I like that it goes beyond the nose job thing. So having the guy from Parks and Rec come in to play the Bradley Cooper character is brilliant. But also this like running joke of like, my blueprints are unorganized and stuff. It sounds like there's a little bit more to that discussion with Bradley Cooper of trying to get him back. that he might have said something about like he has a blueprint for success and this wasn't part of it or something. So they probably add that in.
Nice.
I loved how that wasn't addressed ever. The blueprint didn't matter. It didn't pay off in the end. It was just a non sequitur to like have him be stressed out. I also agree with you that I thought that was the best recast I've ever seen in my entire life. You could take all these famous actors and swap them in and out for each other, but the fact that they're like, oh, you got your septum repaired. You look great. You look great. Like, it's like that's all that matters. Yeah. You can sleep easier now, and it's a completely different person, except for all the pictures where Bradley Cooper. So Bradley Cooper definitely gave them their blessing because they had a bunch of stuff and they had flashbacks and stuff. And then it was Ben Wyatt. Then from there, that was amazing.
Fun fact about that: Adam Scott, the guy who played Bradley Cooper's replacement, didn't know when he joined the team what role he was going to play. Like David Wain just hit him up and said, "Hey, do you want to do Wet Hot with us?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Great, come to set." And when he showed up, they said, "Okay, you're playing Bradley Cooper's role." Well,
that was in the like the production release schedule too. Is they didn't announce who he was going to play, so he even to the public. It was like plus Adam Scott as someone, and so it was definitely a welcome. Like, oh, I know who that is. What? Why is it? Who's he playing? Oh, who's he playing? I was really hoping for another follow-up sex scene, though. That would have been.
Yeah, just top it off. Just
exactly.
You always have to touch each other. But I also think. Just H. John Benjamin, he's always great in anything he does. And he's been playing a can of vegetables for the majority of this series. And that voice of his is just amazing. And just seeing him say, like, he'd like some eggs and a side of hot buns to the lady at the diner and then just having sex with her as a can of vegetables just blew my mind. Oh, my God. It was the craziest thing I think I've ever seen. It was fantastic. And I did kind of like the impersonations. I like the impersonations of the presidents that they're not really on point. They're kind of weird, twisted impersonations. Like this Ronald Reagan is just the goofiest, like, I want to be badass Ronald Reagan. And the George Bush is just like a whiny little twerp. Michael Ian Black and Michael Showalter do a great job with those impersonations. But there were some great new additions too. I think Jai Courtney, aka poor man's Tom Hardy, he actually did a really good job as this like friend of. Could help me with the name.
Amy Poehler.
Amy Poehler's character. He's like obsessed in love with her, and he really played that off really well. But at the first time he gets a big gig to fall in, he just like throws her to the side, and he's like, it's like, I know it was meant to last, but things just happen very briefly. And he's just like very like sophisticated actor about it, but also just a total idiot at the same time. It was good to see that. And then Alyssa Milano as Renata. She was brilliant. Just like, you'd think you'd look at her and she'd be kind of psychopathic, but it's like, is she really? Like when she was practicing with the knife in the hardware store, and it looked like she was going to be a serial killer, but when she cut the cake at the party, just exactly how she practiced with it. Oh my God, it was the best stuff.
Wait, you guys don't cut your cake horizontally?
I don't.
Y'all hold it weird.
I don't hold it from the back of the cake and but yeah, those were some of my favorite wins of it. It was a lot of fun to watch this. And one big win overall, I would say, it was also good to see that I was kind of like, when I first started watching it, it's like, okay, these people are just normally getting back together in camp. I kind of had the same feelings when I first watched the first film. And then they started just throw in the little craziness just here, and then it just started to just cascade into total craziness by like the third episode.
Nice.
Warren, what are some of your wins?
Yeah, I mean, I have to echo a lot of stuff with Brylan says, especially because I was, I didn't know a lot of this backstory. I wasn't sure if Adam Scott. I knew that was supposed to be Bradley Cooper's role. I kind of remember him in the movie, but I wasn't sure if he was like a different character. So I was like, that's kind of funny. I like how they at least kind of set it up. I thought for sure at one point like maybe Bradley Cooper was going to come back later on as a different character, just because like they just do like a why not moment of him playing somebody else completely. I thought that'd be kind of funny, but
Warren, I had the exact same thought. I was just like, he's gonna show up, especially when they're like, oh, wait on this guy. I was like, here comes Bradley Cooper.
Or it would have been funny if he would have like pulled a mask off and he was wearing like Adam Scott's mask or something like that. Like something stupid, something very silly like that.
Someone punched him in the face and like his nose job was ruined or something.
Yeah, but I thought it was still really funny. I love like the bits. I just love like a lot of these comedic moments and these comedic elements all throughout the actual sort of TV shows, like movie now, TV show as well. Like you had mentioned something earlier. Blew it up, the Joe. Oh man, what's his name? Crap, what's his name?
Latrulio.
Yeah, Joe Latrulio. Dude's awesome. Like he's just so funny. His hair is just ridiculous, and how like him and Vic was just by far like a very hilarious sort of duo. I think that was kind of funny as well, and I just like the ridiculous that they actually have throughout the entire one. I think by far I enjoyed the scenes of H. John Benjamin as the can of vegetables, and I think every time he was on screen it was just something ridiculous, especially when he's like doing recon and you can see like the woman going down like the elevator, he's just sitting there and he's just like, slowly inching it. I was like, wait, how is this a thing? Like, how did this happen? And they were even fighting, he was fighting Christopher Maloney's character in the sort of trailer, and that fight scene was just ridiculous. So I think that was just really enjoyed just everybody. I love the fact that they can. And I'm also really wondering, how much of this was like improv, how much of this was scripted, because it felt like it was just they had a lot of fun. I think one of my favorite moments was Logan and Susie's like theater battle off sort of like sequence there. Like they just went through and just talking about like a bunch of actual scenes and like things and monologues that I've done or like plays that I've done. I was like, this is hilarious because these are the things that people sort of argue about. So that was probably one of my favorite moments. Besides, like we'll talk about the ending and like the fight sequences and stuff like that were just ridiculous. So that was pretty cool.
Nice. Mocha, what are some of your wins?
Yeah, so the show was delightful for me. When it comes to Wet Hot, or really anything that David Wain, Michael Showalter, and Michael Ian Black have worked on, the thing is that their sense of humor is their sense of humor. It's kind of hard to explain, and it's not for everybody. You either get it or you just don't get the humor, and it just doesn't work. But if you do get the humor, this is a really nice addition to the collection of their other works like Stella and so on. And they were there, this show was weird and the humor was irreverent and goofy and absurd and things happen for no reason and it's funny because there's no reason for it to happen. And that's what I love about Wet Hot. We already talked about it a little bit, but the explanation for Bradley Cooper's absence is absolutely hilarious. The fact that they make no effort whatsoever to really hide the fact or gloss over it. They just have all the characters acknowledge that he had a septum problem, which was never mentioned at any other point in the show. And I think Amy Poehler's character even goes out of her way to say, you look even better now after the nose job, which is objectively wrong. Sorry, Adam Scott, but Bradley Cooper is significantly more attractive than you are.
That's your opinion, and that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be hard pressed to find someone to say otherwise.
I would take Ben Wyatt all day, every day.
Oh wow.
Who is Ben Wyatt?
Adam Scott.
That's Adam Scott's character in Parks and Rec.
Oh, okay.
Just about the pillow talk. The pillow talk would be amazing. Anyways, go on.
Anyway, Christopher Maloney, Brian, as he mentioned earlier, he continues to be the funniest person in the room in any comedic scenario whatsoever.
He's amazing because he's not known for his comedy.
He's not known, and it still surprises me every time, but he's always just so much funnier than everyone else, and it seems so effortless on his part, whether it was in the original movie where he kept having these Freudian slips where he would say weird things like I want to fondle your sweaters, instead of fondue made and cheddar, or like things like that. Or if it was in this show where he is brought face to face with his daughter, who is literally dressed exactly the way he was dressed, not just in this show, but from when he was a counselor or a chef, cook back in the original movie, and just completely not recognizing it at all. He's still just so funny and so effortless.
That joke seems like it was written when they first introduced the character, the whole Eugene.
Yeah.
No, literally, this is. There was a movie 15 years ago. There was a prequel, and now this is the sequel. And you're now paying off with a Eugene joke. Are you kidding me? Like, it seems like it's like, cool. We're gonna write this script, this crazy character. We need a name. Oh well, we have this joke that we can do a Eugene thing, so we'll make him Gene. But no, this is literally 16 episodes later that they did this, plus a movie. I don't know how you worked that out. 15 years in between it. Yeah, I don't know how you worked that out, but I was losing it for that part.
Yeah, and that's the thing. A lot of times with David Wain's sense of humor, he plays a long con, and you saw that in this season too. The whole idea of McKinley and Ben's characters. They're in a loving relationship, and they're having this really interesting situation where McKinley doesn't trust the nanny, and he thinks she's a psycho murderer nanny, and you keep going up and down with thinking that she is, or thinking that she isn't, thinking that she is, and then finally she winds up attacking him, and they have this really epic fight that's clearly not done by them, it's clearly done by stunt actors, and he kills the nanny, and they both bury her in the yard together, and then at the end of the movie, you find out that it was all a joke, and that the nanny was in on it, and they just have to live with the knowledge of having murdered somebody for the rest of the show. And in every single scene, you can tell how burdened they are by the thought of their secret sin. That's classic David Wain, and it just killed me. Like every time they showed their faces after they realized that they murdered an innocent person, it just made me break out in laughter.
Yeah, or they took the two characters from the beginning of the movie when you see cars driving in that are etching their names in the tree, and they made a whole lovers relationship issue about it in this movie. They made those characters into something where you actually get to know those characters.
I was going to talk about that in the original, or in my wins. That scene never existed in the original movie.
Did it not?
Yeah, they literally merged. Well, I'll talk about it more in this. But yeah, I love how Ian Black turned from this worry wart to, here's what we're going to do. We're going to cut off her hands, and we're going to cut off the legs, and then we'll drive the head home with us. He has this whole crazy plan all thrown out. And then
the best part is when they're at the firewood grill later on at the very end of the show, and everyone's sitting around having really happy conversations, and it's cutting between everyone, and everyone's laughing, and then it cuts to McKinley and Ben, and Ben goes, I can't stop thinking of her face, and McKinley just says, this is our life now. And that's their last line in the entire show. It's so funny to me. Oh, man. But so yeah, like you were saying, Mike, there's so many meta references within this where they're just kind of laughing at themselves and the things that are really obvious. Whether it's, as we mentioned already, Bradley Cooper's character being replaced by Adam Scott, everyone just acts as if there's nothing unusual about that. But then every time you see a picture of Bradley Cooper's character in a frame, whether it's at their apartment in the beginning or on the collage during their anniversary, it's always Bradley Cooper's actual face pasted on the board. The fact that, like you mentioned earlier, Mike, there were the new characters that were part of this film had origin scenes that were spliced into the flashback memories from the original movie just to establish them for this movie, even though they were obviously never at any other part in any of the other episodes or feature films. It just does such a good job at poking fun of itself, and that's one of the great things about David Wain and his comedy style. Also, too, the 10 Years Later series went out of its way to bring back all the little elements that it possibly could from the previous shows. So even little things like in the original movie, you would hear anytime something was thrown or something was dropped, you'd hear glass shatter.
The pot's breaking. It's a pot sound. I was losing my mind for that.
Yeah, they brought that back. They brought back a lot of the similar outfits. They still had, the callback scenes too when Coop and Katie are talking about their feelings. They're in the goat shack, and also why is there a shack of goats in this camp? That's never
because why not?
Sure. The firewood. It has them.
A super like meta thing that they read, or maybe it wasn't even meta, but just was sort of breaking the fourth wall. Was for the entirety of the series, the campers and the counselors all had these chants that everyone knew but never existed anywhere else, and they used them constantly. Like, we opened up the show saying "Walla Walla who," and "Walla Walla hey," "Chicka Chicka Walla," and like they would just keep on going, and it never existed, and it killed me.
Oh, wait, that wasn't a thing?
No.
Never.
Yeah, there was a couple things that I was just like, wait. It, like, honestly messed with my memory a little bit to be like, no, that existed in the original movie. No, it didn't. Like,
the spirit of Camp Firewood? I don't know.
Nothing.
Oh, that's hilarious. And people, like, walking backwards, touching the totem. I was like...
Yeah.
See, it's so funny. I'm glad we can all talk about this because I'm like, oh, I mean, I really need to go watch this movie again. Now, I kept really thinking that in my head, and now I'm like, oh, that really ups the comedic elements of this because they just literally just put that in, and everybody's gonna be like, did I miss something? It's like the biggest troll. Nope. It's hilarious.
Yeah, and they blended it so well because you can't tell what are the references, the really clear references to the old movies, and what aren't. Like something simple, the move, like the one of the first scenes in the series is Beth and Nancy, the camp director and the camp nurse, sitting on on steps talking to each other as they wait for the campers to come out for the day, and that's how the movie opens, and the original movie opens up. That
was a great callback.
Yeah, all these really cool callback shots mixed in with all these things that never had anything to do with the series whatsoever. It just gave this delightful, like Warren said, this overall troll effect to the show. So yeah, it was just delightful, man. You know, like I said, if you like Michael Ian Black, if you like Michael Showalter and David Wain and their writing styles, this movie's going to give you plenty of jokes to laugh at. And also, it'll give you a lot of jokes that'll be way funnier to you later on when you think of it, like after the fact. One of my favorite jokes from the entire series, and I die every time I think of it, is when Vic is going to have sex with or help impregnate that woman. I can't remember her name, and it's his first time having sex, so he's really nervous, and he excuses himself to go into the bathroom, and he's like, "It's all right, it's fine, you have nothing to be worried about, this is sex, it's not scary, it's just normal." And then he steps out, and Yaron and Yana are wearing realistic masks of their own faces. And he just said, "Why are you wearing realistic masks of your own faces?" And their excuse is, "Oh, everybody wears masks." And it's super creepy looking and just terrifying. And the thought of the poor guy like hyping himself up and then stepping out to see that and have that be his first sexual experience is just like, it just gets me. I don't know. These guys, I love David Wain. I love his sense of humor, and I could watch shows like this over and over.
So Yaron might have been one of my favorite like obvious stunt doubles in the entire show, where he would like roll in on that what is the big hula hoop thing that actor or acrobat people ride in on?
Yeah, it's a hula hoop.
But it's huge. Like it looked like Westworld, where you like twisted around, and it was just so obviously not him. And then it would just cut, and then he'd be like, and he'd be like, "Oh, come on!"
And doing the devil sticks thing.
Yeah. Well, it's like they might as well had like a black dude playing him with the amount of just it. They didn't care to find anyone that looked like him whatsoever. If it was any other filmmaker or writer, you would find it offensive. But it's David Wain, so it's just like, yep, that's just how he's gonna make it. None of the stunt guys are gonna look anything like what they are. I thought a couple of things. As we've been saying before, it's fan service. This movie did a great job of blending the lore of the original movie and First Day at Camp together. Like, they had characters and callbacks from both of them, which, you know, in talking about other series, something like Star Wars, where, you know, the latest movie made Force Awakens made nearly minimal references to the prequels. it could have gone down that path, and they didn't. They said, like, all right, this had artistic merit, let's make references to it, which is awesome. The amount of callbacks was incredible. I think that they added fourth wall breaking to this run. Like, I don't really remember it being from the first couple ones. My personal favorite was when I thought they weren't going to include David Hyde Pierce's character at all. You know, they referenced him being, like, away with a daughter, you know, at something. I was like, oh, that sucks. Like, they couldn't get him. And then he comes in, he says 4 lines, and then takes this off and is like, thanks, I guess you don't need me anymore. Turns around, grabs his Emmy, and then clutches it and walks away. Like, that was the greatest cameo like, not even cameo, he was like a main cast member. Like, that blew my freaking mind. And the amount of times they would just talk to the camera and say these non sequiturs that really didn't even fill you in on anything in the plot. Like
Kristen Wiig's character being as pointless and obnoxious here as she was in First Day of Camp.
or when they were packing and they were talking about their respective love lives, and then it was not Susie, not Claire. Abby. Abby was just like, let's go back to unpacking now. And they all just like, nope. And like didn't say a word and just started taking things out of their suit. Like, there was Nancy said that too. Nurse Nancy, she was just like, hey, I'm going to interrupt you to do this storyline. Or Showalter, when he's like, yeah, do you remember that back in episode 2? Like, there was so many things that were just directly talking to the audience that I don't think they've done before. And that had me rolling around. I thought that, like, again, all the characters were absolutely precious. Like, David Wain has this ability to scope these terrible human being characters that you absolutely feel for. And, like, Andy and all his blustering, Coop, he's pathetic, but he's also just, like, you know, you're rooting for him, even though you kind of aren't rooting for him because it's funnier when he loses out with Katie. Like, every single person you both root and don't root for because they're both heinous individuals and very relatable. And it's just so David Wain to do. Let's see. I thought one thing I also have to say is we've talked a lot about having, like, storylines get resolved and how bad it is when storylines aren't resolved. I thought it was amazing that they called out every bullshit little part of their own show. Like, in that whole end sequence, they're like, yeah, what about this? What about this? What about this? And they're like, because that's literally what people do when they Skype in and talk to their friends about movies, Transformers, Michael Bay. They sit and nitpick every little thing that happens in these movies. They're like, well, why did they do this? Why did they do this? And they literally just called out every stupid thing. And like, yeah, I don't know. That's just kind of like how it was, I guess. Like, I thought that was amazing. And transitioning to criticisms, the thing I'd have to say about criticisms is none of them are valid. Absolutely none of them are. This is literally just a thing that David Wain wrote, and it was like, all right, well, this is how it's going to go. It's going to be stupid as hell. It's not going to make any sense to anyone unless you like my style of comedy. The plot is irrelevant. The plot doesn't matter. There's characters, but the characters also don't matter. There you go. I loved every bit of it. But also there was some criticisms, and I'm going to launch into that right now. Mike's Hard Lemonade. So we talked about the hardware store. This is the biggest one. I stopped watching it for like a good 20 minutes and stewed on this because I remember as a young lad seeing Mike's Hard Lemonade and be commercials and be like, oh, this is the new big thing. And I was like, fun fact, I don't think that was when this movie came out. Mike's Hard Lemonade was introduced in Canada in 1996. This is incredibly important and is a very valid criticism. The movie takes place in 91. So how did Mike's Hard Lemonade end up in the movie? Get yourself straight.
I saw Mike's Hard Lemonade first time probably in 97.
Well, no, it came out in 99 in the regular American.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, yeah. I looked it up. I was like, I know this is wrong.
Like, how do you know this?
I need to have facts.
That's interesting that it debuted in Canada, and kind of makes a lot of sense that Mike's Hard Lemonade, like the gentlest way to get drunk, came out in Canada.
I swear I drank one when I was underage, so it had to be like in '97.
I think everyone drank one when they're underage. It's just a very like, really? Oh no, I would definitely did. It was just like, oh, we're drinking alcohol, and then you look back later, you're like, man,
candy.
Never reference the fact that you drank that again.
As he says it on a nationally syndicated podcast.
Yeah.
We're not syndicated, but we are international. Shout out to our 2 UK listeners.
Oh, my brother listens to us in Japan. Do it.
I hear we're big in Japan. Says everyone ever, because it's the easiest joke ever to make.
I am 6'2".
I just got that.
5'5", but way to rub it in. So I thought that one big thing I will say is that the plot stretched in the 6th and early 7th episode. Like, I thought they added the Ginny character just to have a convenient way to have 25 minutes of will they or won't they interactions between Coop and Katie. And in the end, it just felt like it was put in there just to pad time. Like, it was like Netflix said, hey, you need to make 3.5 hours of content at least. It's going to be a super movie. And they're like, all right, well, yeah, we can stretch this storyline to an hour and a half, which would make it more than a movie and just not release a movie. And I thought that was the biggest one, but there was definitely other things that kind of dragged and didn't really add anything even to the non-existent whatever plot line. And so the pacing only in those middle, it seems like a common criticism of Netflix, realistically, that like they have these great ideas and they have great set pieces to open their shows and have great set pieces to end their shows. And then somehow are like, well, we need to be a television show because we're a TV company, not like a straight up movie company. So please add like 3 episodes in the middle that just expand on something. I mean, we've talked about this in every single one of the Marvel ones. Most of the ones that we kind of mentioned in our What You've Been Watching have also, I feel like, have suffered from that in between like plot drag, which is kind of an interesting company-wide thing, I think. The other thing is that I felt that as a result, because they stretched, they made it more individual character-based. Like every episode you could almost describe as having a main character rather than an ensemble piece. And I really, truly believe that this works as seeing the characters interact with each other, not have them do their own episodic adventures. And it wasn't as bad as the newest season of Arrested Development, which, because all their actors and actresses got way famouser, had to work around booking, had to shoot it that way. It didn't feel that bad, but it definitely felt along that path. And there's one last thing. I want to say that the age joke wasn't as funny for me. I thought that it was funnier having people in their late 30s play early or mid-teenagers, whereas people in their 40s playing people that were 26 didn't quite resonate with me, partially because I am only a little older than the characters that they were playing, and that aging sucks. The first time I saw these people, they all were in like late 20s, early 30s and looked very young and vibrant. And now they're all visibly old. And I'm just like, well, I also aged in that time. And now I'm old. And
especially Michael Showalter.
It's like, oh my God, you look like you're ready for AARP. What do I look like?
The best thing is after the movie, Michael Showalter just decided to love hamburgers and like, good on him. Put on a couple pounds. It doesn't matter.
The funniest thing about the Wet Hot, the first day of camp, was when Michael Showalter's character Coop shows up. He's like clearly overweight, where he was skinny as a twig when he was in the original movie. And I thought that it was like a bit, and that they were going to have him actually dramatically lose weight for the last episode, so that way it would roll into the movie. But no, he's just like a larger, older guy, and they just decide to run with it because it's funny to them.
I wish that you couldn't just describe every single criticism with Well, they went with it because it's just funny to them. Because literally everything there is like, yep, the age thing is just, they found it hilarious, so they just threw it in there. They thought
magically Paul Rudd looked younger after 15 years.
Well, Paul Rudd is a national treasure.
He is a national treasure. He's a vampire also.
Yeah. All right, enough of me ranting about like arbitrary stuff that in the end doesn't matter because it's wet hot. Let's go to Warren. You got any sort of criticisms for this?
I mean, it's definitely tough to have criticisms for I have like the least amount of knowledge of it. I definitely can echo what you're saying. I really felt like even this was, I think, 8 episodes. I did feel myself saying, damn, this is not over yet. Like, there's just a lot of stuff that I think they tried to put into it. Even with, like, I felt like they could have incorporated Elizabeth Banks' character a little bit differently, right? Like, with the introduction to that really kind of dragged on a couple things that could have just been like a split screen sort of like, hey, this is what she's doing in the background, and that definitely could have cut down a bunch of things, and just tighten it up or kind of keep it. I think they definitely dragged on for comedic effect or just overall just ridiculousness that I think it may suffer it. But I mean, maybe not as much, right? It's probably not that bad. I just think they wanted to try to give, like you said, Blue, like now everybody on this set now are way more famous than they were, 10, 15 years ago. So I think people really wanted their time to shine a little bit. Even with the majority of the scenes with the Michael Ian Black's character and Adam Scott's character and Alyssa Milano's character, they really focused on that so much more, is that they were actually like the main characters. I felt they ended up being the main characters. Coop and like that love interest ended up being like kind of secondary characters, and then there's just a bunch of other stuff happened, and I like to see more of an ensemble piece of everybody has equal screen time. If everybody has equal screen time, you can kind of cut it down. It can be more concise. More concise means it's more funnier. And then I think those jokes, especially in a succession of boom, 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 you have a lot of those funnier moments all together. I think it'll be I think that would have been a little bit better suited for it. But at the same time, a lot of comedy comes from awkward silences and pauses too. So it depends, right? And it depends on if it works for you, if it works for anybody else. And I think David Wain has a particular sort of comedic style, comedic approach to what he wanted to do. And so he ended up doing what he wanted to do and what he thought was right. So I think, you can only kind of applaud him for that. And I'm glad he made it. I just think there's just some moments that just last a bit too long. And, it's tough to say, was Chris Pine and Jason Schwartzman's character, have they ever showed up before?
They were in first day of camp.
Yeah. The whole that whole thing actually just did happen.
Okay, yeah. So I think even
Chris Pine's character sings a song at the end of first day of camp.
Okay,
it's amazing.
It's like the amount of time that was put towards it, and like the nuclear and all that stuff. I'm like, that's a lot of time for something so small. Arguably, right? They had arguably. Chris Pine's character had probably more than Joe Latruglia's character. And I mean, you could even say, like, maybe even Vic's character. Who that should have been. Like, Vic was kind of sprinkled throughout here and there, but, I mean, not too much. And so I was like, that's kind of weird. But I think that it was an ensemble piece because, also the,
H. John Benjamin.
Yeah, John H. Benjamin. No, H. John Benjamin's character and Christopher Maloney's character were with them also, so I can see that it's like a bit of an ensemble piece there. But, overall, like I don't have too many criticisms beside the things that you necessarily mentioned, Mike. I thought it was weird. I noticed, I looked at it, but I didn't say anything. I thought it was very funny that you said something about the Mike's Hard Lemonade, but I'm like, I wonder if they even cared of some of the things that they're going to put in the background, because that wasn't necessarily out yet, or they kept mentioning, like, what year it was, or what time it was, or, oh, hey, like, I think, going back to a win, right, she has, like, this fanny pack. She says, I have all these DVDs, and she pulls out, like, 4 or 5 DVDs from the fanny pack. I thought that was very funny. Just like as just a sight gag of a thing. I was like, oh, okay, cool. But
speaking of one quick win about times, just because you triggered this, I like that we didn't find out what happened to McKinley at 11 o'clock. Like they were about to say, it's like literally, it was like the whole point of this show was based on the comment they had in the last scene of the movie, and he was like, "No, I'm somewhere at 11," and they talked about it like 4 different times of like, "Yeah, whatever happened to McKinley at 11?" They're like, "Oh, funny story," and then it would cut away to something else, and then they'd be like, "Yeah, McKinley at 11," and nothing, just never actually told us. Loved it.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be all my criticisms for the movie, and I'm sure that I'm probably going to chime in a couple more times because I'm trying to even remember. I'm like, I was just I guess the majority of me was just very lost of, I don't know if I can like or dislike this moment because I just don't have enough information for it, and I just want to judge it fairly.
Fair enough. Bryland's criticisms.
Yeah, my criticism kind of goes along with Warren's, where like what you thought was going to be the background subplot kind of actually became the main plot and was the main focus, which was the president's plot to blow up Camp Firewood. That I think they spent too much time on that. I think that some characters, like even though they had their moments like Jenny and Deeks, kind of unnecessary because I wanted them to continue that Coop, Andy and Katie like triangle. See, was there going to be a grand finale? Like, if there's any 2 people that should have gone head to head, it'd have been Coop and Andy, and that never really happened. They kind of separated Andy, made us do his own small thing, and I was kind of bummed that Andy didn't get as much to do, and that could have been about scheduling because all these actors now, they are like top cats in what they're doing. And I would also say that there were other relationships to focus on. They made it more about like getting these characters back together and focus on where they grew. I think that would have been good to see. And I want to say like, it was just kind of weird to have everything focus on the presidents and everything else got kind of shifted to the background. I thought it was just way too much about the presidents and their plots to do things.
Yeah, I mean, even kind of echo on that one, Brylan, and this is probably a good criticism of, I don't even think the presidents needed to be in the movie. I don't know if this was introduced in the first day of camp, or if this is something new for the movie. But I thought it would be pretty cool if the neighboring camp was trying to get rid of Camp Wildwood. Firewood, right.
Firewood.
I was like,
Camp Tiger Claw.
Evil Reagan was introduced in the Wet Hot, the first day of camp series. He wasn't part of the original film, but he was introduced in the first day of camp.
So was Camp Tiger Claw.
Okay. They
had a big fight.
Got it. So that's why I was hoping that another, like, I think that would be a pretty interesting, maybe a little bit different, but approach to having like a competing camp trying to destroy it, and not because of a old story. Now here's the thing: was that story about Mikey and him pooping his pants, was that ever introduced?
Willie shits his pants? No.
Yeah, little Willie shits his pants was another thing that they just acted like it was always the thing.
Fear of shit.
So it's like one of the things in which they chose to put that in. I was like, they could have. I mean, I just felt like there was a lot of cut sequences. But the fact that I would say another going back when, and I want to give it back to you, Brylan, is you shit on my shit. I laughed. I laughed pretty hard at that one. I was like, crazy. It's so stupid. It's so stupid. 50-50.
My other big criticism is going to be like, throughout all these series, I never feel like they took as big a risk as they did in the original movie when it comes to their humor. Like, one of the best things about the original movie is when you see Janine Garofalo say, "Hey, who wants to come into town?" and everybody gets in trouble. It's like, yeah, we're going to town. And being a former camp counselor, I know what that excitement is. It's like when you're getting away from camp and you're just going back to civilization for a bit, and then it becomes a downward spiral of civilization for them, where they just like start drinking, start smoking weed, they end up shooting heroin and wind up on a street somewhere, and then they come back and they're like, oh, how was town? It's like, oh, it's all right, you know. And I thought it was like the perfect joke for that type of experience, and I wanted to see something that kind of like pushes the edge a little bit more in this.
I would have loved for a rehash on that one, where they're all now working professionals, and they made a huge point of like they're all trying to find their way in life, and then just to see them totally just mess all that up because they all just started doing heroin again. Like that would have been, I would have loved to have that as a callback. But all right, so it sounds like you're good to go, Browland.
Yeah.
Mike, bring us home on your criticisms.
Absolutely. So there's not much that I can say for criticisms that hasn't already been touched on in some way, shape, or form, which I think speaks a lot towards the quality of this show, that everyone's kind of in line with the few things that did bother them about it. But the biggest one for me, as Warren mentioned, the President Reagan / President Bush subplot, I felt was just unnecessary this time around. To be completely honest, it was wildly unnecessary in the first day of camp. Like, it made no sense. But it was just one of those things that David Wain does, and you just accept it and have fun with it. But when it came back in this show from episode 1 on, and was such a major focus, it wasn't. Like, we had already been that route. And one of the gags about Wet Hot is that at the end of a movie or a series, the camp is always in like catastrophic danger. In the first movie, it was like the SETI satellite or something like that crashing onto it. In the first TV show, it was, evil Ronald Reagan trying to shut them down. So I would have been fine with them having some sort of grand evil to face at the end, but it didn't have to be Reagan again. And even if it was, they gave him so much screen time that took away from what I think is the real most meaningful part of this show, and what really struck to was funny for me in the first place is the interactions between the camp counselors. The first movie is just about, there's all sorts of crazy stuff happening around them, but every scene is driven by 2 to 4 counselors interacting with one another, whether that's the love, like, quadrangle between Coop, Katie, what's his name? What's the name of
Andy
and the other female counselor, Elizabeth Banks, whether it's their relationship going on or whether it's, some of the camp counselors following McKinley around and trying to figure out why he has a stick up his ass and realize that he just needs to get laid, when in actuality he's like dealing with other shit and he's a closeted homosexual like Bradley Cooper.
He quite literally has a stick up his ass.
That's a log, right? I'd bet anything. But, all of the humor was driven from the idea of what do these teenage counselors like talk about and joke about and laugh about and get worried about when they're just talking to each other and being real. And every single scene with Ronald Reagan and Camp Tiger Claw took away from that. So I think that there was a lot of room for jokes and just like honest character interaction that we missed there. Aside from that, the other thing about this series, that this particular season that I thought was interesting was, and this can be applied to most of the other iterations of Wet Hot, but I felt like some of the jokes kind of fell flat on their initial deployment. That's not a weird phrase to use, but initially a lot of these jokes fell flat for me, and maybe I just wasn't in the right mindset when I was watching at the time, but almost all of those jokes became extremely funny to me when I thought about them later on. Warren, you already pointed it out, but the notion of evil Ronald Reagan bullying George Bush Sr. and like forcing him to take a shit on his own poop and just being like, yeah, poop on my poop, yeah, your butt's touching my poop. It's just so dumb in the moment, but it kills me every time I think about it. Every time. Some of the dialogue, a lot of the dialogue moved really fast, and there were some gems in there. There's this scene where the girls in the female camper bunk are talking, and I think Abby is mad at Katie, And Abby says to Katie, "Who died and made you king of Shit Mountain? You did." And Katie's response is, "No, I didn't. I don't have that jurisdiction. It's an elected position." It's just like there's so much like good dialogue, and I like not all of it hit me in the moment, but going back and rewatching some episodes and thinking about them later on, they become even funnier. And I think that's a criticism because most people are not going to watch this show again if it doesn't make them laugh immediately. And most people, I would argue, would find it funnier the second time around, even if they're not typically in line with David Wain's style of humor. So, that doesn't... It seems like they put a cap on this. It's the final story of the Wet Hot saga. I don't know how well it would be received if they came out with another season, even though I would love to see these characters together again somehow. But yeah, ultimately, those are, my biggest criticisms. The lack of honest character exploration, funny character exploration, but character exploration nonetheless. And the unnecessariness of Ronald Reagan and George Bush in this situation.
I would even see the characterization was just inconsistent. Like, when you first meet Coop, he's like that, like, quiet guy with a heart of gold type of thing. And then you learn in first day camp, like, he may be kind of a shithead, too, which was also, like, an awesome revelation about Coop, that you saw that, hey, maybe Katie shouldn't be with Coop, because Andy's actually kind of did what's right to save the camp at that time. Yeah, and then 15 years later, he just kind of ends up being nostalgia guy. He's like, remember when, and like, remember how fun camp was? And he's just like, has this weird innocence about him, which I think they should have doubled down on his creepiness.
And also, like, I'm not sure if it was you, Bryland, or Mike who mentioned it earlier, but, there was a lack of Elizabeth Banks' character in this film or show. And she's great. She's a great asset, and she's a great character. But if you think about it, the reason why she wasn't involved in all the camp nonsense was because her character drove the Little Willie Shits His Pants mystery, outside of the camp. And that had to do with Ronald Reagan being the focus of this movie. And if Ronald Reagan wasn't the focus of this movie, we could have had Elizabeth Banks and that, that's like 4-person love affair become like another like talking point, another joke point in the show. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, she got kicked out when she smelled like burgers, so she was out of that.
I was gonna say, do they actually ever present a reason why she didn't go up for the start of the weekend?
She was working. Yeah. She was just focused on her job and trying to get the big
guess. They never really said anything. They're like, oh, here she is.
She never really was like part of the camp per se.
She was there.
She was always undercover.
Yeah, I thought
found a home.
I thought it'd be funny if you would have taken out the Ronald Reagan stuff and the things that she's investigating is the Adam Scott Bradley Cooper thing. I thought that would have been pretty cool. Because that then ties her back to like more character based stuff, and she's physically kind of talking about characters that we've already know about it, and I think that would have been like a bit more interesting. Just that you do something that I think people want to know more information about because it's funny, or like it's and if they can keep parrying and dodging and dodging and dodging, I think that'd be a nice running gag this entire sort of series.
Word up. So, I guess let's go into our conclusion and lasting impressions, also including grades. I'm going to start with Warren.
Yeah, so I would say I enjoyed this actual show. Going from it, and if you're still here and haven't necessarily seen it, I think what I'm probably going to do, just so that I can kind of appreciate everything that I've seen, is kind of go back, watch Wet Hot, watch the first day of camp, and then like kind of chew on to see, exactly what I did and what I didn't necessarily like. But, walking into things blindly, that's what I do. So kind of going into this with hardly like any sort of context, like I would say like my grade for this is it has to be a B. I thought it was good. I thought it was funny. I think even if you can go in not knowing anything and still have a great laugh of just like some just ridiculous that's actually happening, even the bit with you have Paul Rudd saying that he's gonna throw this kid out, the Deegs kid, like during like the t-ball and softball. And he like ends up having the conceding of like shit, I lost. I think that's a very funny moment to actually have. So David Wain does a great job with comedic bits and comedic things, even when you don't necessarily know the story, or you think you may know the story and they introduce something new, and that's still like a very funny element to it. So my final grade would be a B, and I would say definitely I suggest it, and you should go watch it.
Cool. Mocha.
Yeah, so, at the end of the day, this show is irreverent and delightful, just like all of its previous installments. But, unfortunately, it did suffer from a lack of focus on those characters and the relationships that made the first movie amazing in the first place. So, as a result, I have to give it a B-.
Awesome. Browland.
So I'm going to give it a B+. So I love this David Wain humor, and it definitely is always fun to see this unique cast come together. I think it's one of the most unique casts ever assembled. I'm going to give it a B+, and I would say in an order of precedence, I would actually say I like the movie the best, and then 10 years later, and then First Day of Camp in terms of enjoyment. And I'm going to give a special shout out to Sam Levine as Artie. He is the true spirit of Camp Firewood. If anybody knows.
Yeah, Brian, I have to agree with you. The movie, nothing tops the movie. But I really do think that this had better moments than First Day of Camp, and I think I'm going to remember it longer. For that, I'm going to have to give it an A-. I'm going to put a little asterisk next to it. I thought this was a great last romp for the gang. And I agree with Mocha that as much as I like the characters, I'd rather see them make like a Reno 911 follow-up. Or, just take someone of the other, or just make an original IP, and then do that with a crazy cast of like interconnected people that they always get to work with them.
Yeah, I'm not kind of there with you. Like, I would kind of be kind of bummed that I wouldn't see any content based on Camp Firewood anymore. But also at the same time, I think this is actually like a perfect ending for them.
Yeah, it wraps up a lot of things by also not wrapping up absolutely anything. And that's the best way of describing how this works.
Shout out to the very last scene in the movie, or in the show, which was during Janine Garofalo and H. John Benjamin in his human form relaxing on a beach with no explanation whatsoever on how he got turned back.
Just reading the Wet Hot Summer book.
Yeah.
Well, eating a can of the vegetables that he was.
Yep. I'll have to say this, though. Truthfully, this show was like built for me. Someone who's been watching these guys for 15 years or so, and they've been around for a lot longer than that, but that's just what I've been paying attention. I have to say that the weird storyline and the weird callbacks, honestly, if you haven't watched the movie and you don't like a lot of these like non sequitur type of moments, you're probably gonna hate it. I'm not gonna be completely honest. Like, if you like this style of abstract humor, you're gonna think it's amazing. If you don't, you are just gonna absolutely hate this thing, and you're probably gonna think it's like a D or C- tops. And so I could absolutely see it being on a lot of people's like terrible list out of like media that they've consumed this summer. That being said, it worked for me. It worked for me so hard. I got wet hot. It's America. It's also the summer. And speaking of summer, Bryland, where can we find you?
Oh, you can find me making perfect spheres of tweets on Twitter at Bryland, BRILUND. You can also see you can read my mini movie reviews on Instagram at I am Bryland. And also, we're expanding our wonderful family of Down in Front here. And earlier I was talking about video games. I'm a big gamer. I definitely want to actually share some of my gaming with the public out there. So we're going to launch a Twitch channel at twitch.tv/Down-in-Front-Podcast. Don't have exact time frame yet, but we're going to try to start August 24th as the maiden voyage. See how this works. So stay tuned to the Down in Front Twitter to see when that will start.
Julio, let's talk about other 90s rappers. Mocha.
Yeah, so as far as social media goes, you can find me on Twitter at MochaMikeLI, as the Lord intended. Unfortunately, it's not at MochaMike because a man who was already a full-grown adult during Ronald Reagan's actual presidency has that Twitter handle and won't give it up. So screw that guy, screw his evil president. You can also find some photos that I take with a camera on Instagram. That's instagram.com/MochaMike. And also, you can follow me on Medium at MochaMike there as well, where I write full-length reviews of the content that we talk about at the pod, as well as touch on other subjects across the spectrum of nerdiness, from comics to video games and so on and so forth.
I think we're going to jump across the spectrum right over to Warren. Where can we find your work?
Yeah, so I'm going to be talking about a bunch of things, and in order to do a hashtag kill the pod, is that I'm going to say hashtag cast, and that's what we're going to call this, not a pod, because that doesn't make any sense, but this is a cast. So anytime I talk about our podcast, I'm going to mention it as a cast. There you go, Mocha Mike.
No one in the world will know what you're talking about.
Oh,
no one will know.
They will. And
anybody over 35 will know.
You see? And there you go.
Cool. You can tweet at Mocha Mike about it.
Right? Or you can tweet
personally, that's my target demographic. I want to get 65 and older.
At me. Tweet at me, your boy, at ActionJ. That's AXTIONJ, in which I just do a bunch of random things, whether it's running, drinking wine, having a good time, or one of the other projects I've been doing with a couple of my best buddies, Derek and Megan. That's 16 E's in Megan. That is at Friends with Blends, in which case what we do is talk about a bunch of different blends, wines that we actually like. We're super pumped that Apothic Inferno's coming back on September 1st, so keep an eye out for that, because that wine is delicioso. I will be posting a review of the Chime wine, and just a sneak peek, I found some wine ice cream in a shop next to me, next to my new apartment. So I'm pretty pumped to try at least 3 or 16 of those this weekend. So keep an eye out for that. That is at Friends with Blends. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram.
Well, you're getting pretty wild over there, Warren. Speaking of getting wild, I'd like to invite everyone to get a little wild with their credit cards and give us your money. So we have a Patreon account, and if you give up the dollar amount that everyone is waving in my face right now, which is ambiguous because this is not a video, so it could be whatever you want it to be. But patreon.com/downinfront. Your patronage helps cover the cost to host all of this stuff, covers the cost to go see all of this stuff, really makes it able to do for
and I definitely want to also kind of do a huge shout out to a roommate, Troy, who actually gave us a huge donation. That's actually the largest one that we actually have signed up as a subscriber for Patreon. So definitely huge thank you for that. I actually didn't thank you on the show, so I apologize for that, because that was a couple weeks ago, but thank you so much.
Thank you,
to our man Troy. He now gets to have us reenact one scene from MacGruber at his choice.
Brian almost died.
That whiskey's coming out his nose.
Yeah, I'm sorry, dude. You're wasting good whiskey on that one. So yeah, patreon.com. It really helps us out to push out more of this stuff. And even if you don't like us, please support us, which that makes no sense. So if you do like us, or if you don't like us and you want to reach out to us and tell us all of your opinions, please absolutely email us. We're at downinfrontpodcast@gmail.com. If you want to do the social media thing, you could absolutely hit us up at DIF Podcast. That's at facebook.com/DIF Podcast. And our Twitter is _DIFP. That is the initials for Down in Front Podcasts, because at least we're consistent. Please check us out. We are on the App Store from iTunes, as well as Stitcher, for all of your sort of mobile device needs. There is one last thing. Our email for this week is Jesse's Camp Spirit.
I like that.
It's sweet. It's to the point. What are all your disgusting pervert ones?
I was
Jesse's shits his pants.
Yes.
I was gonna say Jesse's brown shit stains, but I
was gonna go with
Camp Spirit.
I was gonna go with Wet Hot American Jesse.
That's even better.
So basically, we've got email options. Please hit us up at email.com. We've been the Down and Front podcast. You've been our Ryan Dowds. Thank you for tuning in this merry night. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
I love you.
Chick, chick,
Tweet.